Hello, everybody. Today we've got a special guest, Jean-Christophe Eloy, founder and CEO of the Yole Group. The Yole Group is a research and consulting semiconductor research, technology research company based in France. And Jean-Christophe is a long-term veteran of this industry. He will be sharing with us his look back at 2024 and also what he sees ahead for the electronics industry in 2025. Jean-Christophe, welcome to the chat with Mike and Bola.
Well, welcome, and it's a pleasure to be in here and be able to have this open discussion with you.
Thank you. So we've also got here Mike Markowitz, who stepped in recently as editor-in-chief of the Ojo Yoshida report. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So, Jean-Christophe, I remember that, I'm not sure whether it was towards the end of 2023, we talked about your outlook for 2024. And one of the things you said then was that you mentioned NVIDIA as one of the companies, not just to watch, but the company to keep all our eyes on. That's kind of basically was what happened in 2024. Both NVIDIA and TSMC were probably the prime stories of the year. So I just want you to look back at 2024 and tell us what were your findings like? What did you see and were your anticipations met?
Well, I think it has been a year of with a lot of contrast. On one side, the growth of NVIDIA, the growth of the data center business related to Gen AI implementation has been extremely high, both for NVIDIA, but also for all the suppliers of NVIDIA, including the memory makers, Hynix, of course, but also advanced packaging services at TSMC, the foundry at TSMC, front-end, back-end foundry at TSMC, and also the substrate manufacturers. So the growth of NVIDIA has really pushed specific players also in their way in order to grow in a similar way. So Hynix has done a very incredible year, as well as TSMC. The sales of TSMC have never been so high, so it's really impressive. But on the other hand, if you're looking at the companies that are more in the industrial business, automotive, medical, and so on, the year has been difficult, or even extremely difficult for some of them. ST has been really struggling a lot. Infineon has been okay, but it was difficult. And all the other players that were not related to this AI growth have suffered during the year, in fact, with lower growth of the automotive business, uncertainty of electric vehicles, also lower growth linked to industrial applications and so on. So very contrasted year depending on the players. What we are ending the year with two things that are, I think, positive is that, well, NVIDIA continue to grow, and there is a lot of things that is happening, but also a lot of questions. I will go back on that later on. Automotive will go back to growth, certainly the second part of this year, potentially Q4. I don't think it will be postponed to 2026, but it will go back. So all the companies involved on that, so any analog device, NXP, Infineon, ST, and so on, will find growth opportunities starting Q3, Q4 this year. And same for the industrial activity. It seems that the investment cycle in the industry will go back after the uncertainty related to the US election and also what's happening on China. So 25 will be certainly a good year in terms of for semiconductor device for most of the players, maybe not all of them, but most of the players. So it's a good entry of the year, let's say like that, related to that. But maybe there is one thing that is important to highlight. So CS just ended last Friday. If you look at the new products announced at CS, well, there is not so many things that have been announced that are really interesting. There is one thing I think that has, for me, is quite interesting, that TVs are getting inputs related to AI in order to be able to get more services or provide more services to the person that are watching. And TVs will certainly get a lot of more semiconductor content related to that. And this part is very important because it's something that can really bring new value to the TVs that we have in our homes, and it's something that is, I think, of significant importance. So out of the output of the CES, but a part of that CES has been very disappointing for me. Well, NVIDIA has made the show, okay, great. Some TV players have made the show, great, but outside of that, well, it has been very, very limited as an announcement of new interesting products. AI, all the AR, VR, mixed reality is still there and trying to find a way as a product to the market, but it's difficult and it will take time. Automotive disappeared, clearly. And so there is very, very limited output in terms of new products that are coming out of the CES. So we can think that 25, 26 will be really relying on the growth of the data center, the servers, the AI-related applications, and go back of growth linked to automotive and industrial applications.
Why do you think the type of products that came out of CES were that limited? Or is it part of the fact that the industry is trying to do a reset with regard to coming back into growth phase, or was it that AI was just so domineering that a lot more attention was put into products focused on artificial intelligence?
I think it's both. Clearly, AI is driving a lot of investment, of course, linked to the data center, and NVIDIA is taking full benefit of that. But also in terms of what can you do out of that, because the use case related to AI are still to be invented. And there is more and more use related to that, but it's a free use of AI. So I think there is a lot of development that is happening in order to see how can we use such a tool, both for, well, consumer application, but also for business application. So it takes time because it's not so easy to master. There is a lot of potential behind that. And I think the focus is really on that and not on other products. It was clearly not the year of new announcements in linked to automotive. There is a lot of innovation that is going on, especially in China. New cars in China are just incredible, but it was not the focus of CES this year. So that's all. So I'm really a believer that automotive will go back again and go back with a lot of innovation, a lot of new things, because related to infotainment, related to security, ADAS, and so on and so on, there is really a lot that is under development linked to automotive, which is, I think, good both for us as a user of cars, but also for the semiconductor industry, because semiconductor content is still growing very heavily on all these cars. And the second part is the use of AI, either for business application or consumer, that will step by step reach, I think, a real market. Time is needed. It's not so easy, both for the developers and for the users, but it's something that is very important as a market potential. And so CES, I think, was really the picture of that, saying that, well, there is things going through AI, there is things that are under development in the use of this AI, especially for TVs, as I mentioned. And then in between, well, it's still cooking, let's say like that. It's under development.
Jean-Christophe, I was going to ask about AI at the edge and how are things developing there? You spoke a bit about the data center, but can you?
Yeah, well, it's for me, it's something that is still under development. First, because in terms of technical development, ability to have well, enough computing power at the right price is not so easy. So there is developments. So ST is making developments linked to the microcontroller. They have launched microcontroller with few AI options, and it's good. So it's more, we are more in the start of that, compared to really have something that is mature. So it's really the start. So yes, it will happen, because for a lot of reasons in terms of simplification of the sharing of the data, linked to the consumption related to that, but also linked to the fact that at one point, the level of investment we see of Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and so on related to AI and AI infrastructure, it will not last forever. I think Microsoft has announced $80 billion investment related to AI this year. Well, they will not it will not last 10 years at that level of investment. It's just impossible. So I think what we see at the moment is really a very strong push of few players in order to kill the competition. Very high level of investment of Microsoft, few others, in order to be really the companies that are leading the way with the best infrastructure in terms of calculation infrastructures, in terms of servers and so on, in order to kill the competition. And then certainly the level of investment will decrease because it's just not sustainable to stay at that level. And then there will be an increase of this AI on the edge in terms of applications, because once you have the infrastructure in terms of calculation, then there will be a sharing of these AI functionalities on data centers, but it's very expensive in terms of power consumption, in terms of computing power, and some at the edge in order to have a lot of functions that could be done directly in your computer, in your mobile phone, or in the server in the company. And the announcement of NVIDIA about their box, I don't remember the name, is also, I think, for them a smart way to first to forecast that the massive investment of Microsoft and others at servers will decrease, and they are preparing themselves for something that will be more related to business activities at companies and continue to grow, at least maintain the level of sales that they have through that market on at the edge functionalities. And it's part of what they are doing. They are playing on both, being on the wave of this massive investment that continue this year, but 26, 27, it will really certainly go down just because it's not, as I said, it's not sustainable. And they are preparing the products so that the edge AI computing could be done at companies and having the products and the services related to that.
I recall a statement by Jean-Marc Sherry, the CEO of ST, who said that 2025 will be a transition year for the company. It's kind of interesting that based on what you've described so far, how you have companies that are still in development of most things, including even the massive investments that are going into AI. These are supposed to kind of prepare them for what they see ahead. So, and the same thing is happening with, AI at the edge. Does it mean then that if you look ahead at 2025, 2026, we're going to see this continuing growth in investment, but in terms of the products that come out of it, we're still in a transition phase?
Yeah, I think so. And you can see also that related to the automotive and the use of this computing power in automotive. Renesas has announced a collaboration with Toyota on a 3-nanometer chip. I think this is the first time such very advanced chip will be developed for automotive applications directly. So there is a diffusion of these capacities in terms of computing and the related technologies in all applications. And we are, I think 25, we're still in this investment phase, certainly 26, but then you need to get a return on investment. And the return on investment, we'll see what will happen, and we'll see who will pay for that. But my understanding is that NVIDIA is preparing that also to say, okay, things will be on data centers, very clear, and the LLM and all these things will be on data centers, but there is a lot of applications where the company don't want to share the data. And it will be, they are preparing the equipment, the computing box, let's say like that, that will be focused on the company so that they can put their data on things that are at the edge, taking the benefit of the AI models, but not sharing their data. And this is really, we see this transition that is step by step happening, both on software and hardware, where the ability of NVIDIA, but also of the customers of NVIDIA to enlarge and to be able to solve one of the problems of AI at the moment is that you need a lot of data to train them. But the problem is that a lot of data in companies don't want to share that. And it's a way to overcome that so that they get access to LLM through computing power, but where the data is preserved, is used, but not shared. And I think this is very, very interesting as a moment where you see this evolution toward more industrial applications of AI.
Our discussion is about what lies ahead. And I know you've prepared some of your own thoughts on what you see ahead. I'd like you to share this with our listeners. let's hear from you and from the Yole Group what you see ahead for 2025. What are the areas that you believe are going to be very important to this industry based on your outlook?
Well, I think there is three things that are really driving the evolution of the semiconductor business. First, you really see in China at the moment a lot of innovation linked to cars. A lot of innovation, but it's really incredible. First, because the competition is extremely high between the Chinese car maker. And the second is that, well, they have no barrier linked to the heritage they get from the last 30 years, 40 years, or 100 and something years. This part is very important. The future of automotive is really created in China at the moment, and not at BMW, not at Mercedes, not at Audi, or in Ford and GM. And the fact that they are thinking the cars as a new consumer product with functionalities that is really here to push the sales and the adoption of that kind of products is really changing the way you see the car industry. And all of that is based on electronics. So the use of electronics, the increase of electronics is extremely important. And so it will redrive the growth of the market in the next 2 to 3 quarters. So this is really for 25. The second point, which is also related to China, the Chinese content, so semiconductor content in cars, in all products is increasing quarter after quarter. And it will continue this year. And the new US administration will certainly continue to enable that because of the tariff and the sanction that is happening in the industry. And so the growth of the production of semiconductor in China will continue at a very high level. And there is nothing to stop that. The only way to stop that is certainly to stop selling EDA tools in China, which will never happen. But it's really the Chinese semiconductor industry will continue to grow, including leading edge, by the developments they are doing locally. So there is no stop around that.
So let me just quickly follow up on that. I've written that it's kind of like a losing game. When we apply all of these sanctions, rules, regulations, restrictions on importation of this and that, including semiconductor equipment, and there's a strategy behind that, to kind of push back Chinese development in those areas. But at the same time, we are forcing China to accelerate those same developments. I think we're just kind of like in a catch-22 situation where no matter what the West does, it's not going to emerge as winners for the Western government. But I'm also concerned about the companies that are involved. It's one thing for the government to come up with all of these rules and regulations, but companies have to play by those same rules and regulations, whether or not they want it. And in some ways, they're going to lose market share.
Yes, totally agree with you. So if you are looking at the impact of what happens since 2017 on China, Huawei is still a very powerful company, and they are manufacturing a lot of phones and a lot of other telecom infrastructure systems, and they are as powerful as they were before. If you're looking at the level of production of semiconductor device in China is at the highest level we have ever seen. They are getting much stronger in the equipment side because they have developed equipment in competition to what the US, the European, the Japanese equipment makers have been doing so far. So in some fields, including lithography, including some of the process steps, there are years and years and years between what the Chinese are doing compared to ASML and the others, but they are on the way. Materials development has started also a few years ago in China and is increasing. So all the impact of this restriction on China has just pushed the semiconductor activity at a higher level. So clearly they don't have access in a very simple way at the leading edge technologies, but all the others are well developed in China. So yes, it's really I think at the end of the day, it's a bad game because you are increasing the competition coming from Chinese companies. For the moment, they are focusing on the Chinese market, but in the future, they could go to other markets outside of China. And the second, you have cut big markets for European, US, or Japanese companies in China, where they are losing ground. They have lost ground just because they were not able to sell the equipment or other devices. And it's tens of billions of dollars of sales that have been lost on that. So for me, it's really, well, I don't think it's a good game for China, but they are taking benefit of that by increasing the speed of developments locally and step by step pushing the system makers in order to increase the content of semiconductor coming from Chinese manufacturers so that step by step, quarter after quarter, year after years, they will push the non-Chinese suppliers out of the Chinese market. And it's starting. The BYD cars, the Chinese content of BYD cars is increasing every year. The content of Chinese semiconductor device on mobile phone is increasing, and companies like Maxent in the RF business is really increasing a lot, just because that the Chinese mobile phone manufacturers are not able to get access to the US content. So at the end of the day, it's not good for the non-Chinese semiconductor business, and it's good for the Chinese semiconductor manufacturers. So this is like that, but the resilience and the ability of the Chinese semiconductor industry has been really impressive in terms of adaptation and ability to push their own solution.
You started out by talking about three things that are driving the evolution of the semiconductor industry. I think you got to number two, if I'm right, before I interrupted. Can we go on with your assessment of the market?
Well, the other things that impress me is the reinvestment that is happening in Japan. So TSMC has created a capability there. You have new investment coming from the power device on image sensors, new investment in the Japanese car makers, which is including Honda and what they are doing now with Nissan and Mitsubishi, but also Toyota, but also Denso, but also a lot of semiconductor manufacturers for the automotive and industrial business. And the level of investment and the level of developments related to that in Japan is really, really impressive. And I think much more impressive compared to what we see in Europe at the moment. So Japan is 10–12% of the world semiconductor market, but the investment is really wise, and there is a growing importance of the Japanese players in this industry that is very, very significant. And they are using automotive business also as a forefront development around that. So Japan is important. Japan is getting more and more important. The Kioxia IPO, the IPO of SanDisk in US, there will be certainly at one point the two companies will certainly join forces. We can forecast that because of the link with that. So there will be a lot more happening in Japan in this industry, in this semiconductor industry, as there is big investment, big players, and a willingness really to go back on selected markets, but very, very significant impact. Taiwan is strong, Korea is strong, but there is no changes in Korea. Korea, Hynix is very strong, Samsung is very strong, very clear. But Samsung has some struggle at the moment internally with their technology implementation. TSMC has never been so strong, and all the packaging industry and related industry in Taiwan is in its way of developing that. But Japan is emerging as really a new country in order to be able to redevelop the semiconductor industry locally.
What's the alternative to TSMC and as a foundry for the entire global semiconductor industry? And there were talks about maybe something could happen in Korea. There were plans that the US had, including for the CHIPS Act and what's happening with Intel, which is not really, I'm not sure it's going somewhere. So if we're going to have a second foundry that's going to be strong enough to serve this industry, do you see it emerging from Japan, or it's going to still be a TSMC play for the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, competing against TSMC is really, really, really complex. And you can see with Intel and Samsung developments, their own developments. Samsung guys, Intel guys are really, well, top-notch, but they have problems to continue at the same speed compared to TSMC. So I don't think we can find a competitor of TSMC in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, but in the next 5 years, it's not possible. The ability, and it's a matter of technology, it's a matter of mindset. Well, the mindset of the TSMC guy, well, the Intel guy lost that years and years and years ago. So they are really fighting for their life on a daily basis, even if they are leader on their field. So this mindset of always pushing, being in advance to everybody is there, and is really a very strong driver of their developments. And this, I think, from what I've seen from the outside, has been lost in Intel long time ago, and is a question for Samsung. And the reshaping of Samsung, the reorganization they put in place, is really here to, I think,